Nick and I met a couple months ago at some conference, and we ended up being together on a panel. And I was like thinking, I have to invite this person for my conference because he's got such an interesting stories and such a great answers. So without further talking me, I would like to introduce here Nicholas Horney, and he's an author of several books. His last book is still waiting at publishers to be published. It's called the Vuca Masters. Yeah, here that is. And I'm sure you're gonna enjoy today.
I guess that's take it away, Nick, and go ahead. Well, greetings, everyone. I could say good morning for most of us, at least here in the US, and good afternoon for those in Europe. I'm very fortunate today to not only speak on this relatively new topic and new book, soon to be published, as Zuzi very well knows, the publication route, but I'm fortunate to be joined by two tremendous colleagues of mine. One is Dr. Koshi Makai, who is not only a leadership agility consultant, but he is also a Vuca Master, as well as a Vuca Master coach. So Koshi will be sharing a bit about his experience as a Vuca Master and really breathing life into the concept of what Vuca Master is all about. He will be followed by Laura Santana, and she will share a story in terms of what it's like to work with a leader who is certainly on the journey of becoming a Vuca Master. I will begin the process by providing a bit of an overview in terms of what the heck is a Vuca Master and what is that all about. The three of us are behavioral scientists. As you can see, we've got the PhD in front of us, and some people say that that stands for piled higher and deeper, but I'd like to believe that we've got relevant and useful information to share with you, but also challenge your thinking in terms of some fresh thinking about what is leadership agility all about. So with that in mind, I'll spend about 10 or 12 minutes on my presentation. I'll be followed by Koshi Makai, who'll spend again about 10 or 12 minutes, and then he'll introduce Laura Santana, who'll take about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll leave whatever time is remaining and available to us for questions and answers. So without further ado, Vuca Masters, and you'll see here that it's the title of the new book, coming out, and you always have to have a much longer, detailed title to it. So it's Developing Leadership Agility Fitness for a New World of Work. So leadership agility fitness is kind of an operative term, which I'll get into and explain further in detail. But a Vuca Master in this new world of work, we'll get into, and I'll share with you a bit more about what is this? What does that take to become a Vuca Master? And how can that apply to you and the roles that you have, clients that you may be working with, leaders that you may be working with? And by the way, too, we believe leaders can be in any role. It could be as part of a team, it could be part of an organizational hierarchy. So leaders in any role. The book itself, soon to be published, does describe and introduces the whole idea of conducting an annual leadership agility fitness exam. And I'll share a bit more about that in terms of how that relates to an annual physical exam that many of us go through that process with our physician and doctors as we check out our health. This also, Vuca Masters also includes two books. It's the book itself, Vuca Masters, but also there's a practitioner guide that is a companion guide that goes along with that. And that's a self-help, type of guide that helps you apply many of the concepts introduced in the book. And then there are profiles of Vuca Masters, including, Koshi Makai is one of those, which comes from a variety of backgrounds. My background in 23 years spending time in Navy special operations and dealing with Vuca and the disruption there often allows me to reflect on what it's like to be able to deal with a variety of types of disruption, whether it's at work, whether it's in my private life, or whatever. But also other business executives, nonprofit leaders, and others were included, in the book. So it's not just a book about executives, but it's about leaders in a variety of different roles and different challenges that they face. So VUCA, the term VUCA. And I was very fortunate to have a former 3-star lieutenant general write the foreword to the book. And I've extracted just a little bit that he shared about what VUCA was all about, since the U.S. Army War College were the originators of the term VUCA. And for those of you that may not be as familiar with the term VUCA, it was introduced in the early 2000 period of time. It really describes, and as you can see the graphic here, the kinds of disruptions that certainly we've experienced recently with COVID-19, but also digital disruption and hybrid work design, cybersecurity issues, the gig economy, and the list goes on and on. And it's our belief that VUCA is here to stay for all of us in terms of the kinds of disruptions that we'll be experiencing. And we believe that that is the world and the new world of work on into the future, and will be impacting all of us. So we started there in terms of identifying what is this marketplace and what are the challenges that we face. By the way, I've been focused on leadership, team, and organizational agility since 2001, when I started up Agility Consulting. And our focus has been just that, to really understand the human factor and the human behavior related to leadership, team, and organizational behavior. And in that time, been able to certainly network with the Agile Alliance and people like Zusi and conferences and the work that's been done there. And I find it a great opportunity to be able to share, again, coming from different backgrounds and different experiences, be able to share points of view and some understanding that that we have with having done this over 20 years. With that said, the different kinds of VUCA, and I don't think any of this is unusual to those that are on this Zoom meeting. I mean, the whole idea is the whole new world of work. Everything is changing about the way work is getting done. Hybrid is the new term, really defining how work is organized and where we work, who does the work. Artificial intelligence is becoming part of the work. The gig economy is part of the work in terms of project teams. How do we lead? How do we lead in that kind of hybrid environment, which will be one of the challenges, I think, that all of us face, and all of whether we're working inside an organization or whether we're delivering some agility support to organizations. So it's a VUCA world, and really describes the variety of changes in work that we're experiencing. I use the metaphor of fitness to really describe the whole concept of leadership agility fitness. And many of us have our annual physical, and think of the doctor as the coach. The doctor that actually interprets the information and says, hey, maybe says something like, hey, Nick, you really need to do a bit more balancing your meals, maybe a little bit less alcohol. Your flexibility needs a bit of work. You're doing too much muscle building with all the running and biking that you're doing, so really work on your flexibility. And oh, by the way, your 6 hours of sleep, just not getting it. For many that know me, I get up about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to get into my fitness routine. And some doctors may say, get at least 7 or 8 hours of sleep. So all of this, when you think of your doctor as your fitness coach, really provides you some thoughts and ideas about maybe in your annual physical on things that you can work on and things that you can improve. The same is true, and it's our proposition that leadership agility fitness is a term that can be applied to the whole concept of leadership agility. And fitness, we think of it in terms of an agility fitness exam. And I'll show you an illustration of a leadership agility fitness exam. But we base it on the Agile model, which we developed back in 2001 and introduced that to the world, basically 2001, 2002. It really focused in on the 5 core elements and the 5 drivers of what we refer to as the Agile model. And you'll see those here. You'll see that they happen to spell Agile, and we'll get into each one of these a bit more in depth. But leadership agility fitness really applies to leaders in any role. And I really want to emphasize that it's not just the C-suite executives, it's not just business unit leaders, also includes project leaders. It also includes the independent contractors that are working as part of teams. How do they demonstrate leadership agility fitness? So I think of it as very, very similarly to the medical model of fitness, of being able to get, and shouldn't we have an annual leadership agility fitness exam, because our context is changing so rapidly, because VUCA is disrupting the way that we work and the context of how we work. It's important to think about a regular exam check on our leadership agility fitness. And let's dig into a bit more about this Agile model that I introduced, and some of you are aware of it. And I think it's important to go into some of this in a bit more detail. And I'll take you through each one of these briefly. The first is to the capability to anticipate change. That's one of the 5 major drivers of the Agile model. And we can code that someone that scores very high on our leadership agility profile 360 assessment as an anticipator, someone who really understands and senses the marketplace, senses this disruption, understands the trends, the patterns, et cetera, and is able to preemptively and proactively deal with the disruption that's coming at us. So let's each of us think about what have we recently experienced, and many are still experiencing with COVID-19. To what degree did we do a good job of anticipating the changes that we needed to have with our suppliers, changes that we needed with our employees in terms of how many were going to work remotely and how many were going to work in hybrid situations? So the idea of being able to anticipate the changes is a critical component and a critical element of the Agile model, one of the elements of leadership agility fitness. The second one is generate confidence. And think of a generator. I think of someone that really is engaging and really connecting. You'll see here in this image, you see it's team-based. And how do we align what we're doing across the organization? How do we focus in on, and I know many of you, focus in on engagement and in collaboration, et cetera, which is critically important in terms of generating confidence. And generating confidence is about, and when do we feel most confident? When we're winning, when we've had some good successes and lots of good attempts to be able to get some good successes. So generate confidence is one of those, and we use a characteristic that we can call a generator for someone that scores highly in that category. Initiate action, and we'll see that that's described as initiator. These are those people that demonstrate the kind of characteristic of bias for action. Make things happen, quick decision making, and collaborating. Again, let me go back to COVID-19, and many of our clients that truly demonstrated the kind of leadership agility fitness that's necessary in dealing with a large pandemic like that weren't waiting around for big government to tell them what they needed to do. They were doing things quickly, they were iterating, they were experimenting, they were trying to figure out, again, how do we deal with this in a very different context than we've ever dealt with in the past. So it's that bias for action, and it's making things happen. The fourth component is liberate thinking. It's not liberal thinking, but it's being a liberator. How do we free up? How do we create that kind of environment that says, we need innovation, we need idea diversity in terms of coming up with new ways of being able to execute and deliver on the kinds of products and services that we need to have. And it's up to leaders, and leaders that are Vuca Masters that are able to demonstrate. We really need to create that kind of environment that has everybody bringing the new ideas that are very customer focused to the table and getting implemented very quickly. The fifth is evaluate results. Yes, it's about metrics. It is about being an evaluator, but it's also about clarity and creating expectations that everyone buys into, that there's real-time feedback so that in fact we know progress that's being made, feedback is given based on fact-based measures and metrics, and whether it's KPIs or other metrics that are utilized. How do we provide those and utilize those as leaders, as part of teams and as part of organizations on an ongoing basis? So it takes all five of these and the peak performance in all five of these to really be a Vuca Master. A Vuca Master is at the peak in peak performance in all five of these of anticipating change and generating confidence, etc. You'll see here in this graphic is that what we've found over the past 20 years of doing this work and literally thousands of assessments of leaders globally is that anticipating change is typically the weaker area. It's the Achilles heel, if you will. It's what we find that we don't do enough of really anticipating change, identifying the trends, understanding the kind of patterns so that we preemptively and proactively address the change that we know that's coming at us. A way of looking at a leadership agility fitness exam is one of the tools that we have is a leadership agility profile 360. And it's a way of getting inputs from yourself, your boss, your direct reports, your peers, and others that really provide a lens through which you can look at your leadership agility fitness. And we're working with leaders to really institutionalize that so that in fact there is value in an annual leadership agility fitness exam because the context is constantly changing. How do we work to create that kind of initiative so that in fact we're doing this kind of work to really understand what are the things that we really need to focus in on as a leader and in terms of leadership agility fitness, and what are some areas that we can keep reinforcing that we're doing well on, et cetera, and building that development plan that says, okay, I know the areas that I need to work on. Let me seek others' input on that, and that's what this is all about. So finally, I just wanted to leave here. I will turn it over to Koshi immediately after that. We've set up a website that is called vucamasters.com. I'll provide these slides to Zusi that will have the link in there. And as part of the website itself, we've established something called the Vuca Masters Academy. And it'll be a place where other resources can be found, the book will be found, et cetera. But again, we wanted to provide that kind of resource for you so that you can be aware of some of that, hopefully new and innovative work that you haven't seen in the past. So I will stop my share at this point and turn it over to Koshi and let him tell you a bit about what is it like to be a Vuca Master.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. I'm a total nerd, so I would do my very best not to get too into the weeds. I think Nick has done a fantastic job of helping us understand the model itself, but really it's about thinking about this from the perspective of a way of life, right? A mental model. So beyond just a model, hopefully you can see this as a mental model. And the reason it works as a mental model for me is because my personal and professional journey has all these different pieces aligning with the model. I appreciate the fact that Nick, he actually didn't ask me if I wanted to be in the book. And so I found out that I was in the book really by mistake. So Thank you for that, Nick.
You're welcome.
So here's the basics, right? So I'm originally from Zambia, so it's wonderful to see all of you being from so many different parts of the world. At one point, I thought you guys were my family because I have 8 siblings, all of whom are all over the world, right? Barbara's in England, Carol is in Belgium, Eugene was in India, he's back in Zambia, Alex was in Mozambique, and I think he's back in Zambia. Fred was in Thailand and England, and Francis is in South Africa. Victor was in Maastricht, and then Brian's in Thailand. So my whole family is all over the world. So we've had a little bit of an understanding when it comes to what VUCA looks like from different perspectives. And so when you start to think about what mastery around VUCA really is, it's not really thinking about it from the perspective of constantly or winning all the time. It's really about thinking about the battles that VUCA bring. And I want to win as many of those battles as possible. And so when I think about my personal journey coming from Zambia to the US as a 19-year-old, 10,000 miles away from home for the very first time, what were the key elements that allowed me to be successful, right? Obviously, it was a little bit of training in how life is just unpredictable. And that's what we get a lot from VUCA. It brings so much disruption. Now, while there's so many pieces that are unpredictable, there are certain things we can do to bring a little bit of predictability to our world. And as human beings, we really love it when we can predict things. Now, we're not going to predict things as efficiently and as effectively as we need to. Most of us are worse than a newscaster. But what we want to do is to get a little bit of comfort in the middle of our process. So whether we're leading an organization, leading a community, or leading a family, we want to have some semblance of order. And so that mastery idea is really thinking about it from that perspective. What are the things that I can do that can influence my current environment? Right? Most of the pieces inside of our environment we cannot influence, but I can influence the pieces that have to do with my reactions, right? I can figure out what are the things that I need to do to anticipate the things that are coming. How can I, place a few hedges around certain pieces that are a little bit more vulnerable than others? And so my journey started in Zambia. As a 14-year-old, I started playing basketball professionally in a league with people who were 10 and 15 years older than I was. I'm 6'3", so I don't know if you can tell, but I'm 6'3", and I was probably 6'1" by the time I was 11 or 12, somewhere there. I was a pretty tall kid, and that was a brand new environment for me. There was a lot of VUCA in that environment, right? I was one of the youngest people ever to play for the national team, one of the youngest people to ever play in the league. And there was a lot of disruption for the league because they didn't know how to handle this situation. How do you handle a kid who's barely in high school playing in a men's professional league? What are the things you have to consider around making those changes? And so I had to consider those things as well. And so trailblazing was exciting, but there was a lot of VUCA involved in all of that, right? Things were very volatile, things were very uncertain. There were all these pieces that I had to think about. And so this concept of fitness really resonates with me as an athlete, because I know that in order for us to be successful as athletes, we have to develop discipline. I think of all folks that work in the corporate space, whether that corporate space is a large organization, a small organization, or their own organization, I see them as corporate athletes. And so this concept actually works for me because as a corporate athlete, one of the things you have to do is constantly be training and developing yourself. And whether that training and developing yourself is, as Nick mentioned, sometimes it's stretching, sometimes it's cardio, sometimes it's strength training. And then there's another side that most of us don't think about. The other side is resting, right? We have to allow our muscles to take some time to rest. And so it's all those concepts rolled in together and really thinking about those disciplines. And so how do we translate this beautiful model into daily disciplines that allow us to be better at developing, say, a bias for action? right? I'm sure all of us have been in enough meetings in our careers where you asked yourself, probably 5 minutes in, why are we having this meeting? And it's crazy because you know how meetings go. You have a meeting so that you can set up a meeting, and then you have another meeting to set up the next meeting. And nothing's really getting done because we're doing a lot of talking and a lot of meeting, but action isn't following that. So how do we develop that sense of a bias towards action? Now, some people have it naturally. I'm a planner. And so if you've ever taken the Clifton Strengths assessment, I am all the way on the right. I'm a learner, as you can see from those books up there. I'm a learner. I like to really think in terms of strategy, but I think my true strength is in, now that it's translating what I've learned into actions, right? Into things that are measurable. And so another part of this idea of becoming a Vuca Master is not only developing these amazing disciplines that help you stay on track and be a veritable force, both personally and professionally. It's really making sure as much as you can that you're thinking about the future and how you can measure it, right? I'm sure you've heard the idea that we measure what matters. I am huge on measuring, because if we don't measure things, we don't know whether we're gaining any ground. And part of the idea of performance is in those small measures. I am getting ready for a test in the next couple of weeks. Like Nick, I'm in the Navy, and we have our, we do two cycles every year where we have to do our running, our push-ups, and our core work. And I've been working on shaving off time, because as I shave off time off my run, I get more points for that particular part of the exercise. Well, there's only one way for me to know whether I'm improving, and that's if I measure. If I just go out for a run and say, well, I feel like I ran faster, that sounds great, but unfortunately, it's not something I can bring to you as solid evidence to say I am making a difference. So you go from running, a mile and a half in 11:35, and then you drop it down to, 10:45, and then to 10:20, and then perhaps to 10:15, and then to 10. Those are measurements I can see, and then I can ask myself, why is it that I was able to do these changes? What specifically changed? Was it the terrain? Was it the rest before? Was it enough stretching, I'm sorry. Did I reduce stress in the places where I needed to reduce stress, etc.? So the measurement pieces are another component of really developing this mastery around VUCA, that we've become strange bedfellows with measurements. I need to measure as much as I can in my environment, because those are the only places where I actually have control. The other places I really don't have control. And if I don't have control in those areas, then there's no point in me wasting my time. I have a very simple rule. If I can't do anything about it personally, I don't waste energy on it. I try to focus on the areas only where I have control. Other places I may have as much influence as I can, and I will exert that influence. And so it's recognizing the difference between control and influence. And if I can look at those two things, I can develop the necessary mastery for me to grow. Let me share one more thought. I have a sticky note that sits on my desk, and I look at it all the time. And it's got this thought around growth tracks. And in the growth track process, we start as an apprentice. And from being an apprentice, we go down into being a journeyman. And from a journeyman, we go down into being a master. But it's not enough for us to hit mastery at the bottom. So think of your journey in terms of agility as gaining different black belts or different degrees of being a black belt, right? First degree, second degree, third degree, 10th degree, whatever that might be. That over time, you will make sure that learning is a central part of your growth process, that you are never comfortable with what you know. You're always seeking to know more. You're always seeking to find new places where you can bring value to people, especially the people that you serve and the people that you live with and live general life with. And then as you do that, you go out and learn more things so that you can come back and then bring even more. And it becomes this constant cycle. There is no mastery in life if we don't have a willingness to learn. And what I love most about this model is that it's not just a mental model, it's a life model that says, go out there and anticipate change. Go out there and generate as much confidence as you can. Do as much liberating thinking as you can. Evaluate as much as you can. Gain as much information as you can, and then start the cycle again. And that's really the process that I have used to go from a professional athlete in Zambia to coming here and establishing a life over 20 plus years and really flourishing both as an academic, but also as a practitioner and serving clients globally. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I am going to turn it over to Laura, who's going to share her experience as she coached somebody who really should be a Vuca Master. Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Koji. Nick, for setting the stage, and Koji for sharing your very personal example. I would like to bring into the conversation, if I could, an example of what this looks like as we are using the concept of leadership agility in the new world of work. And I had the fortune of meeting and coaching a very unique individual. So I want to introduce you to Marta del Rio. The United Nations awarded 5 women around the world for their work in sustainable development goals. I have a little image of the SDGs on the bottom right-hand corner of this screen. And Marta is from Peru. Even though her career has spanned Latin America, she lived in Spain and the United Kingdom. So when the United Nations and the International Leadership Association recognized her work in the sustainable area, they chose me to coach her and work with her. They named her Businesswoman of the Year when she was in Peru because she gained recognition from sourcing superfood products from the Andean region where she lived, and she had very unique supply chain procedures. She was really liberating her thinking when she said, I will only use products from sustainable farming practices. And she is working with women in the Andean region who never thought of themselves as businesswomen or entrepreneurs, simply farmers. So she's actually working towards eradicating poverty in the Andean region. I was so intrigued by Marta and her path and her new way of thinking as she came from the world of fast food and mega food thinking. She really wanted to do things differently. There is a podcast if you're interested in learning more about her path and her VUCA mastery. She is really trailblazing from Spain to Peru. Wasi Organics is her company, and what she's doing is trying to improve the well-being for the world, actually through her products. What she is doing is changing the fabric of people's lives. She is doing that beyond profit. She is really thinking about sustainability and moving her thinking into the area of regenerative business practices and products for the world. So the new idea was to source from sustainably practicing farmers. She was very good at generating confidence. So if we think of Nick's agile model, she wanted to help them liberate their own thinking, from thinking of themselves as working farmers to leaders with an entrepreneurial mindset. The ways that Marta became evident to me as someone who was practicing mastery in a VUCA world was her thinking early on about gender equity and the empowerment of women. She also wanted to make sure that her business was considering conscious equity in wages. She, as the CEO, will never make 5 times more salary than anybody in her production or line working crew. She has disrupted the way the supply chain practices have been in status quo for decades. And she wanted to make sure that she was protecting the biosphere in her region of the world in South America. She has spent a lot of time mentoring other people, and I know her entrepreneurial spirit to be fearless. So I believe that she is a Vuca master. And then not only did she, during the time we started coaching relationship in 2018, during that time, she actually signed a contract with Marks and Spencer in the UK and Whole Foods in the UK to carry her line of organics in their stores. When she was about ready to launch her organic baby cereal line, the pandemic hit. Her launch was scheduled for March 16, 2020, and that is exactly the day the lockdown started in Lima, Peru, which is where she is headquartered. By April, she realized that she was going to need to entirely rethink how she was doing business. She was seeing around the corners about what might be happening. She had planned to rely on the medical field, on pediatricians to do about 100% of her marketing and promotion. And she realized that with the disruption, that was not going to be a viable business plan. So if we think in the categories of how Martha was able to weather the storm, she did some very unique things. So she sensed the scenario was about to change. She had lived in enough countries that she was aware of the logistics of getting back and forth and getting her supplies back and forth and getting things from the Amazonian rainforest in South America over to her contracts in Europe might be a bit challenged. So she started doing her thinking very early on. She actually had one child in school in England and actually was able to get her on the last flight home. And she had a son hiking Machu Picchu, the Inca Trail, and was very difficult to contact him to bring him home. At the same time, she was thinking about her business and engaging her board of directors very, very quickly and early on. She wanted to let them know, I think this is a disruptive environment even more than before. I want to let you know what I'm thinking. I want to get your buy-in. She called and spoke with all of her line workers to assure their safety. Some of them were very nervous and would not come back in to the production line. So she herself took production into her own home so that she could help out instead of having her employees feel nervous about that. She was also very proactive at generating confidence with her customers and her clients. She quickly rethought her procurement. She had asked, when she first heard of the pandemic, she asked her chief operating officer to procure 3 to 6 months of supplies. And that was met with a very large deal of resistance. But she was able to persuade that the supply chain might be jeopardized. She actually reached out to new promoters to launch her cereal line. She went ahead with the launch, but she realized that she could work with other people like nutritionists. She realized that she was going to have to depend more heavily on social media sources. So she activated her network of friends, and she actually, when you think about liberating thinking, she was able to deepen her commitment to sustainable and regenerative practices with her supply chain. But she contacted actually a university locally, the business school, and said, if you need a case study for your students, they can work on developing very quickly a marketing plan for this new product. I will have a prize for the winning team. It will be a competition. And so with a reduced budget, she was able to actually have a very successful launch by leveraging resources that were very close to her she had not thought of leveraging before. She marketed with a low budget. She did not have the pediatricians, but she had very quick engagement with the universities. We continue to check in, Martha and I, As her coach, I wanted to make sure that not only an annual checkup for her leadership agility fitness was on her mind, but during extreme VUCA or disruptive moments, we check in every 2 to 3 months, depending on which challenges are facing her. And if you're tracking news in Latin America now, we have a new Lambda variant that is hitting the country very, very hard, as well as some presidential elections, which will bring challenges to their infrastructure. So we continue to work on Martha's strength and her endurance and her flexibility. She is not getting much rest, which Koji has reminded us is very, very important if you want to be in fitness as a leadership agility VUCA master. So more than once a year, we are checking in, because if we want good people to do good work in the world, agility fitness is a very important concept. So we remind each other to continue to check in, whether you are coaching yourself, whether you are coaching another person in their own VUCA mastery path. It is important to keep this top of mind, the check-ins to sustain our fitness agility. I will go ahead and turn this back over to Nick in case there are questions that people would like to ask.
Terrific. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Koshi. Appreciate that. Zusi, I think it's kind of in your hands right now in terms of other questions that might be there. Actually, we're finding it quite exciting to introduce the concept. And really, most people understand the medical model and the value of an annual fitness exam or getting our annual physical. What we're trying to reinforce, and with many of our clients, we are doing annual leadership agility fitness exams, that is also valuable as well.
So guys, you can ask questions in the chat, or you can just raise your hand, and there is this button for it in the reactions, and ask. In the meantime, I have a question. So working with organizations, what is the most difficult to share the message through, or where they most struggle? And it can go to any of you, right?
Well, we'll find that oftentimes we will find leadership, and I know even some of the research reports that are out there is that leadership, and often leaders that we've worked with in the past and are currently working with, have built their leadership approach and their style, et cetera, based on what they have learned over the years. And oftentimes those are not the kind of leadership frameworks or leadership agility expertise that is really needed for leadership on into the future. And so in dealing with some of our leaders that we do have as clients, really getting them to unlearn some of what has gotten them to where they are right now, and getting them to rethink and relearn what it's like to be able to lead in this new world of work.
Nick, I'll add to that. I guess, much like Nick has mentioned, the other side is really leveraging those three areas inside the model. The people, the technology, and the process. So for us, that's really been the challenge, is folks want change without changing anything. And so that's really been the biggest struggle is, hey, this sounds great. And then once you mention what actually needs to shift, what actually needs to change, it's, oh man, that's a little too much. It's, there's too much going on for us at this moment. And so for the clients that are very serious about making a true dent in the process, at least in their organizational culture, that's really what they do first, is they look at themselves, at least we ask them to look at themselves from the perspective of people, technology, and process. Are they leveraging those three well? And if they're not leveraging those three well, what's causing any of those things? but also do they actually have the right people, the right technology, and the right process to sustain the Agile model? Because you need those things in order to sustain the Agile model effectively. So that's usually what we run into.
Susie, I would add to what Nick and Koji have shared, the power of the collective beyond an individual considering their VUCA mastery and their leadership agility of fitness. When Koji, Nick, and I have worked with organizations and have had the opportunity to work with the executives at the top, this becomes a collective way of asking questions that drive the teams to really rethink, like Nick was talking about unfreezing and rethinking things. So not only having an understanding at the higher levels of how this is relevant, but they began to hold each other accountable as a senior leadership team, which then they could talk in a collective voice. We think, as they informed their teams, I think that this is how some of the openness to new ideas gets transmitted. And we also know that changing organizational culture is quite a lengthy process. But I think having the we instead of the me is one of the most important things for organizational application of this.
Saurabh.
So first of all, the three of you, thank you very much for sharing your perspectives, your experience here with us. For me as a medical doctor, the analogy to the annual checkup resonated really well. Now, when I think about that, once you go to a doctor once a year, you get your blood sample, blood testing, you do some other tests, maybe a colonoscopy or even like other things, depending on how old you are, etc. And then you set some goals. Maybe you want to lose weight. Maybe you want to build up muscle. Maybe you want to become more hydrated, whatever. And usually there are some metrics that you can then look at on a continuous basis, because you cannot go to or most people won't go to their doctor every week and get like the full annual checkup, right? So what would be what kind of metrics would you recommend to people, depending on the goals they want to achieve, that they can measure by themselves on a daily or weekly or monthly basis so that they become better over the course of the year until their next checkup?
That's a terrific question, and I'm so glad of your background and how that fits in quite nicely. We see it very much the same way in terms of, as a coach, as an executive coach, and giving them a leadership agility fitness exam really results in data and information. The leadership agility profile 360 was a good example of that. As a result of that information, we work together to build a development plan. Maybe I need to concentrate more on anticipating change. Maybe I need to continue doing what I'm doing around generating confidence. Maybe I'm weaker in the area of liberate thinking. And so part of what we would work with on this development plan is how do we capture information about how they're demonstrating more liberated thinking in meetings that they conduct. Let's say, for example, we work with them in their development plan to have a colleague who sits in on those same meetings, who's going to give them immediate feedback about part of what they need to do is to just shut up as a leader and ask more questions to try and encourage liberated thinking. And if that's not occurring, then this individual can provide that immediate feedback. And also, as an executive coach, we will sit in these days virtually on these meetings and give exactly the same feedback. I mean, it's feedback about what you have on your development plan is to work on drawing out more input and more perspectives, et cetera, around their ideas and liberated thinking. And I will provide immediate feedback to them in terms of how well did they do in this particular meeting. And they need to do that. They need to know that. That then becomes very data-driven and information-driven. Others, Laura, Koshi, seem to fit with you?
Thank you, Nick.
Yes, I appreciate the question because I think, so Rob, we do need to be vigilant in our own development path. And maybe having, Nick spoke of which are your low scores once we do the assessment, and having a weekly check-in with myself about even a subjective self-rating on how do I think I did this week will actually be a reminder to be conscious of the opportunities, identifying opportunities where I might try a different behavior, and then maybe engage other people. Another question on a weekly check-in might be, did I ask for new ideas, or how often did I? And so there may be very simple ways of asking questions using these 5 areas that I could do a self check-in. We've also seen people use accountability partners. Once every month or so, sit down and have a 30-minute conversation with someone.
Cool. Thank you, Laura.
The only thing I would add to that is, the best leaders, at least those that we find to be agile leaders, they're extremely self-aware. And so as a medical doctor, part of your job is to bring me to the point of a sense of awareness of what the issues might be so that they become top of mind. And so when we've gone through that process of helping someone develop that sense of things being top of mind, now there's a little bit more thought before they make certain decisions. We're not saying that you can't enjoy a greasy burger. You just can't eat a greasy burger every week or 3 times a week. And it's about making those distinctions between, because most people assume if I go to my doctor, he'll tell me to stop doing X, and I just have to completely stop. But it's really about reduction. How do we go through that process so that when a person looks back over the month, over the week, they can say, normally I eat a burger every week, but what I did this time was I ate a burger every other week. And then the next month it's once a month. And then now it's once a quarter, whatever that might be. And these are the things that I replaced it with. And so I think those measurements are important, whether a person uses, at least in the food analogy, whether a person is using an app to track the food that they're eating, or in our case, where we're trying to help a person develop that sense of leadership agility, it's right, a very small diary, nothing crazy, just once in the morning, once in the evening, a 1 or 2 liner that talks about the one thing that they were able to change. At least in our practice, we're finding more and more, when you give people 4 things or 3 things or 2 things to do, it's too much. But when you ask them to do one thing, but they have to think hard about what that one thing is, because we always want it to be that one thing that will have the greatest amount of impact. And then they can practice that one thing for a month, for a quarter, and for some clients, even for a whole year before they roll over into that next one thing. So that'll be my addition.
Thank you, Koshi.